Hi, it's counselor and educator Dr. Greg Jantz. Have you heard the term trauma dumping? What's trauma dumping and why we don't want to do it and what it means and how we need to move on? No more dumping and getting help.
Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
Not long ago, I wrote a book on the topic of trauma. Trauma is the word of the day. Trauma is what we're getting calls for here at the Center A Place of Hope. It's trauma. I've been traumatized. It's a word that's being used a lot. And not that it's a trendy word. It's not even necessarily a pleasant word. It is an experience. I have been traumatized. I have been dealt with in a set of experiences that are overwhelming, and it's happened multiple times in multiple layers of this injury and hurt and emotional overwhelmness, oversaturation, and that's the trauma. Triumph Over Trauma is the recent book. I use the word triumph because I do believe there is a triumph, a victory over the effects that the trauma has. The trauma in our lives can have an effect that poisons us, it haunts us, it follows us, it's heavy burdened in our life, and it requires a whole person approach to address. You've got to deal with the spiritual side, the faith aspect of what trauma. We've got to deal with what does it mean even to enter the realm of forgiveness? How do I let people out of the prison I'm holding them in for all the trauma they created in my life? How do I deal with my physical health? I've stored this trauma in my body. I've had physical issues, inflammation. I've had gastrointestinal issues. I've had headaches. I've had aches and pains. I've had inflammation that has created other issues in my body. And I've struggled. I carried this depression. I carried this anxiety. I've been diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. You can see the complications. It's affected then all my relationships. I have a hard time with trust, or I move from relationship to relationship because I have unresolved trauma in my life. And trauma is real, and the symptoms of it are real. So from the relationships, my opinion of myself, how I see myself, who I'm going to say God created me to be, I can't see. That's what trauma does. And so the term right now, trauma dumping. And this is where an individual, it comes in different forms, but I want to share 3 key concepts in my notes today as it relates to trauma dumping. I know that's a funny way of even putting this. Trauma dumping, what is that? It doesn't sound too pleasant, does it? And if you've been on the receiving end of trauma dumping and a person that doesn't know really who or what to share with, and they go on and on and on, you may find that you're in a place of a deep trauma dump from somebody. No boundaries, just giving it all to you. Okay. There's no discernment about who to share with. Here are 3 key characteristics in case you have somebody in your life, or in case perhaps you find yourself just wanting to ooze out all this trauma, right? Number 1, lack of consent. Whoever is being shared with, the listener, hasn't really granted consent to be even emotionally prepared for the intensity of the traumatic event being shared. The intensity. See, trauma, if you just start talking about the abuse and the sexual abuse and everything that was done to you, and it comes what seems to be out of the blue, and we're sharing with somebody that has no frame of reference even how to help us, it's like we're recreating trauma and we are bleeding that over to another person. And that really can be traumatic for them. So lack of consent. And I'm sharing these today because you may have somebody in your life that's a really good trauma dumper. No boundaries. Every time you see them, they're dumping. Usually it's something from the past, could be from the present, but indiscriminately, they are just letting it roll. Number 2, disproportionate sharing. Just sharing I made a note, highly personal and distressing details without any understanding what this could be doing to another person and the context of what they're sharing. You could be in a church foyer, and all of a sudden they come to you and they just start sharing. It's the wrong context. There's other people around, and you're probably not the right person. So they just have no sense of appropriate sharing. Number 3, they have a repeated pattern of trauma dumping. It's a pattern of behavior. They may, if you're on the receiving end, probably they're not doing it just with you. They're probably doing it with others. Now, this could be clothed and I'm sharing this with you. Please pray for me. You don't know how bad it is. And so it could be clothed and dressed up in request, but it's still, let me just say, for the setting, without permission, really inappropriate. And a person that does trauma dumping, they have a poor pattern of sharing without asking permission and sharing with the wrong people who really can't be of help. And so we got to be careful. Again, a lot of folks really genuinely care, and we want to usually be of help, but we're caught off guard, and it's inappropriate. And I know it's not a psychological term, but you'll end up feeling slimed. It's like, what just happened? What just hit me? And that can be of great, when I say slime, it's like, I just feel like I was dumped on, and I feel dirty. That's another way of describing slime. All right. Now, why do people do this? Okay. If I've had a lot of trauma in my life, I'm probably desperate. I'm probably having a lot of depression, anxiety. I might have a hidden addiction. And that hidden addiction is maybe it's digital, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's popping pills, cannabis, gambling, anything I'm trying to keep it a secret, but it's my way of coping. And that is also distorting my boundaries with others. Okay, lack of coping skills. And that's the first of several things. Just 3 things I want to share on this. But if I don't have coping skills, I am literally boundaryless, and that will ooze over to other people. My toxic pain begins to poison others, and others don't know what to do with that. So a basic lack of coping skills. But if I was traumatized, I probably was never taught how to cope, how to deal with stress, how to deal with the emotions, how to deal with anger, fear, guilt. I have no skills in that area, and I don't know how to deal with deep wounds and hurt. And so then I emotionally bleed on other people. All right. Number 2, it's related, but it's a lack of awareness. There are really some folks, they just are clueless, they're just not fully aware of the impact of this sharing on other people. It's such that they're just unaware. They believe everybody's strong, they can handle this if they think that far about it, and they're just going to share it. But they really are not aware. They're not aware that, hey, I could be sharing with somebody that really is not prepared for this, or they're not the right person. They have nothing to do with helping me. So total lack of awareness. Usually, if there's a lot of trauma dumping, there's a lack of what we call emotional intelligence. I don't understand boundaries. I don't understand appropriate sharing. And there's just a low. I'm not good in the social skills arena, and I struggle with relationships and boundaries. I invade in people's personal space, etc. Now, the other and final reason I want to mention why people trauma dump. And by the way, I like to keep these short, to the point, and there's times where we need to dig in and do more. But I want to give you the overview of, since we're seeing so much, this term that keeps coming up, trauma dumping. Well, that means there are a lot of people with hurt and injury, and they're looking for help. Finally, number 3, unresolved trauma. Now, unresolved trauma is that. It's unresolved. And it's impacting a person's daily life. And they maybe have had a lot of counseling, or maybe not. And they're trying to just cope. But they're so wounded that there is just no internal governor to help them stay on course, and they're wounded, and when they are dumping, they're really asking most of the time for help. Some just want to do it and move, and they're not sincere yet about getting the kind of help they need. All right, lack of coping skills, lack of awareness, and number 3 was person has clear unresolved trauma, and they are wounded, and they can then turn it on and wound others, because you can become emotionally abusive to another person with unresolved trauma. How to set healthy boundaries? Well, you got to have these if you're dealing with trauma dumping. And we need to look at, okay, what is the right context that trauma can be shared, discussed, and it's not for casual coffee shop talk where others are going to hear. So we've got to have boundaries about where. And appropriate means the setting for traumatic experiences. When I share something, or I'm allowing somebody to share something, what's the next step in order to get them help? What is the next steps? So a lot of times a person will share, and you'll feel deeply responsible to help them, but you don't know what to do, and that's part of the inappropriate sharing. All right, emotional support boundaries. Let me define this. You may need, if a person's dumping, to say, I do really care about you, and I care about our relationship, but I'm realizing that I'm not the right person for what you're sharing, but I want to make sure that I help you get in the right direction, or the help you need. So basically what you're going to do is, thank you for sharing. I do highly value our relationship, though I realize I'm not the right one to share. So I need to make sure that we work together to get the next steps, so that I can get you to a person that would be appropriate. And then if it's appropriate, I can pray for you, know that I support you, know that I care about you, but I need to let you know I'm not skilled. I don't know what to do with what you're sharing, and I do not want you to be in any way injured again. So let's get the right help, the right direction. So, all right. So we need to remember that trauma dumping has an effect generally on the person who's in the receiver, the listener, and a person that does not have boundaries could be just dumping their emotions. It's usually wrapped up into anger, which could be hurt, bitterness, resentment. It could be wrapped into fear, which is anxiety, chronic worry. They just got this anxiety virus. And then could be wrapped up into shame. They feel very shameful. So those 3 potentially toxic emotions that are being carried around with a person that does a lot of trauma dumping. But remember, the 3 basic human needs that we all need, that we can still give them, though we're drawing a boundary about we're probably not the right person to share with, but the 3 things that we can give them is acceptance. Acceptance means love. These are our three basic human needs. I can accept them without allowing them to overshare. Okay. And I can say, I really do care about you. I'm realizing I care about you so much. I got to help get you to the right person because I realize now it's not me. Okay. So that's acceptance. The next one is everybody has the need to be really acknowledged, which they need to know, yeah, I heard you. I listened to you. And that's why I'm really listening. That's why I realize I'm not the right person. So listening, but that acknowledgement that they have value, that you care about them. And then finally, affirmation. You want to affirm their value. So when I say, look, I so appreciate you wanting to share with me, and I really, really know that this is important, and I want to just affirm you for your bravery in sharing, but I want you to know we're going to help get you the right help, the right direction, and if it's appropriate, I sincerely love and care about you, and I really do affirm you. So, three basic human needs: acceptance, which means love; acknowledgement, okay, it's acknowledgement that you hear them and understand. Understanding is a key word there. So it's the deep listening, even though you're not going to let them continue to keep trauma dumping. And then finally, the affirmation. They need to know they have a sense of value and you believe that about them. All right. We have the deep dive would be the book Triumph Over Trauma. Also the workbook. And we use this a lot in groups. Counselors use the workbook, which I'm not showing. I'm just showing the regular book as a resource so that we can work through this. But trauma dumping is also an indication that a person is needing help. It is, in a way, a red flag, and a pattern of doing that is saying, look, I need help, but I just don't know what to do if I'm dumping. And your job, our job, is to have appropriate boundaries, given the three basic human needs: acceptance, because you can ask a person to look, please don't share anymore. I really love and care about you. I'm going to make sure that we get you to the right resource. So you're going to affirm them and acknowledge them. All right. Trauma dumping. Here's what to do. Look, do I have people in my life I'm allowing to just continue this behavior? And do I find myself even kind of wanting to avoid them because they're always sharing really difficult things or negative things, and you realize I would rather not talk to them because that's what they do every time. That's what to ask yourself, and then identify who these people are and work on boundaries. We can do this kindly and firmly, but we do work on setting an example with appropriate boundaries. All right. And we're going to feel a lot better as well.